Welcome to the Visual Storytelling Podcast. My name is Fred Ranger, and I'm so happy that you're joining us this week for another inspiring conversation. This week I have a very special guest. His name is Devin De Leon, or should I say De Leon in French. And he's an internationally published photographer from San Antonio, Texas. And he's been a musician too in the past. We're going to have to talk about that. We have a couple similarities there. But he's mainly known for his exquisite portraits. He also shoots weddings and also do a bit of street photography. And I really, really enjoy his photography. But first off, Devin, welcome to the show.
How's it going? Happy to be here.
Man, it's been a little while. We've been chatting on Instagram, and we have a couple friends in common. We've been on other podcasts together, but I'm so glad that we're sitting down today because I'm a big fan of your work. But before we talk about the actual work, can you walk us through a bit more on how you became a photographer in the first place? We were discussing pre-show that you've been a photographer for a long time now, but what got you into that art form in the first place?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. Pretty much. Well, it kind of goes back to just the days of cell phones not being, good cameras. When I was 18, just kind of out of fun, I bought a DSLR because, back then that was kind of the only way to get a good photo. And I really just shot that for years and didn't really even realize I had like an eye. I didn't really even, know anything. I pretty much just shot auto for years. And during that time, I played music, and I was, just solely focused on that. So I didn't even think, anything about photography really. And then when I went to college, so I kind of went late. I went when I was 25 to 28, and I studied English, and I wrote for the newspaper, and they were short on photographers. So I kind of just said, I'll shoot some photos for, I have a camera, I can shoot some photos. And then I fell in love, and by that time, I had also pretty much stopped playing music. So, it was just this new passion that I dove just headfirst into and, realized like, oh, actually I have a pretty good eye, which I didn't even realize, I had just been shooting for fun.
But what would you say, and there's a lot of us that started in the music scene. I don't know how it is in Texas, but in Canada, Montreal specifically, a lot of photographers were musicians. And are you seeing the same trend is my first question? And secondly, do you feel that being a musician actually adds to your eye or to the way, you photograph in the end?
Yeah, I do see that trend. I feel like it's like musicians and skateboarders are photographers. Yeah. A lot of us, or like at least my favorite photographers. I feel like we're formerly like either a musician or a skater or like still do it. But I do see that as a big trend. And I do think that it does affect the photography. It's almost visceral. You almost I can't even describe it, but I can see it and feel it in the photo, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's a certain aspect of the rhythm of an image or of a story. And then there's the whole, storytelling aspect of it. I mean, listening to a song, you are walking into a story or into somebody's mind or somebody's lens, literally, on life or on a situation, and looking at an image. I'm like you. I feel that there's a lot of similarities between both. Skateboarding, though, I will say that I tried it and I got hurt really bad. So I said, you know what? Let me stick with the video and photo cameras, and I'm going to film my friends, and I'll let people with real talent do all the tricks and take all the risks.
Yeah. See, I never could do it, but playing in punk bands, especially in my early days, when I was 14, 15, it's all of our friends were skaters too. Exactly. You know what I mean? So I don't know. So there's still some connection there, I think, maybe musically.
I remember.
I too was not a skater.
Well, there you go. So for me, also, music kind of saved me there because you had to do something, right? To be cool at school.
Yeah.
music or
Yeah.
skateboard was kind of it back then, and no kids. I mean, I guess we're about the same age or almost. And yeah, no, there was no Instagram, there was no freaking social media, so
Mm-mm.
you had to do something with your life,
Yeah.
and those were the
Yeah.
two things. But let's go back to photography. So you decided to invest time and effort on that front. But how
Hmm.
did you discover what you like in that art form, or what type of photography you wanted to go with? I'm pretty sure you explored a lot and that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
shot a lot of different things when you started.
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of have to. It's like a big thing. It's like such a big blanket statement of like find your niche. But I think the only way you can really do that is by like shooting everything and then finding like looking at your work and seeing what is almost your best work or like what you're happiest shooting. I think like if you can find what you're happiest shooting, then that'll become your best work. If that makes any sense. And so, actually, I took a darkroom class at the Southwest School of Art here in San Antonio, and the professor was told me pretty much like he's like, you know, your other photos are good. He's like, but your portrait work really stands out. Like he's like, you seemingly can get like just the most out of your subjects. And he told me to like he said, you know, focus on that, and pretty much just have ever since. But yeah, I've shot everything landscape. I shoot street photography, but I feel like I don't shoot the typical like I don't know. Mine are more so street portraits.
Yeah.
Like I love just you know walking up to somebody and being like, "Hey, can I take your portrait?" Or just like starting a conversation with somebody. I just love meeting new people and like learning their story, and then if I can take the photo, cool. Or if not, still cool. Like
But
still
that's
just a cool moment.
but
Yeah.
that's great because you're basically bringing, to your point, what makes you the most happy when you shoot, and you're bringing it on the street. So actually, you can
Yeah.
do it in the studio, outside of the studio. Devin, just be careful with the AirPods. It just like
Yeah.
when it goes on your
Oh,
hair,
sorry.
it does like. But I think the listeners
Oh, sorry.
will
Sorry.
not
Sorry.
necessarily hear it. But Devin,
Okay.
let's talk about the studio work. So I saw a little intro video with you, and you were talking about, you
Yeah.
know, the fact that it's kind of your happy place where you can shoot people and basically bring to life that art form. So talk to me about that specific place. What does it mean for you when you're there in the studio?
I feel like the studio just the possibilities are endless. So I love just getting a subject or like working with a subject on like a some kind of piece conceptually, and just fulfilling that dream, that image. Yeah, I love working in the studio. That's my happy place. I love the streets because there's an unknown to the street of like you don't know who you'll run into. So both are really fun and uh, great places for different reasons.
And how do you work
Great
with
approach.
the light? I feel that this is something that a lot of photographers, and I will say some photographers say, "Oh, you know what? I only shoot in natural light." Yeah, it's because they don't know how to
Uh
manage lights, right? So, what would be
huh.
your tips
I
to
feel like
some,
that's the
yeah,
yeah.
to somebody who's like, I don't know where to start. All these like big lights and stuff. How do you calibrate them? How do you mix them together? So, what would be kind of your tips for somebody who wants to do a bit like you do, but doesn't know where to start?
Oh yeah. I mean, so I'm kind of just a big reader, and there's a place I think it's around everywhere. It's called Half Price Books. Basically, I just bought old studio books. I mean, I watched YouTube, of course, but like, I just went back and like bought a ton of books from like the 80s and 90s and probably even early 2000s. Basically, everybody, and I actually taught a lighting class this year at a local print store. And my biggest thing is buy a light meter. Like, I feel like most photographers don't want to for whatever reason. And I was even hesitant for a long time, but buy a light meter, buy one light, buy one modifier, and just start there and like play with that until you kind of master it or get really good with it. And then you can start going crazy from there. But start small, start simple, measure the light. I'm huge on that. It just gets you very consistent results. And so
Are you the
buy
type
a
of
light
guy
meter,
who
everybody.
can do
Yeah.
a one light, you know, type portrait, and you know, you deal with one light, or you're trying to mix, you know, background, foreground, 4 or 5 lights, because I've seen anything from like Joe McNally with 17 lights to people who, I think the strobist, his name was back in the day. I don't know if you remember him. He was doing all of his portraits with one small light. So where do you sit in that range?
I'm a one light guy. I feel I'll do 2 or 3. It just depends on like the situation. But I think if you could do one light, I like using a big umbrella, like a 7-foot umbrella.
Yeah.
So it's like super soft. So you do have to get a big light, but one big light, one umbrella, and throwing in a reflector, and you're good to go.
Nice. This is something.
Just move that light. Yeah, just move until you get what you're wanting.
I think that's what scares people, like you're introducing another thing you need to manage, another thing that has a setting. And if you are a photographer that, is not necessarily well versed in like technology and so on, it can get daunting, to have to manage all of that. And then you throw in the fact that you have to kind of manage it in real time in front of a person who's like either paid to be there or paying you to do the job, then it adds a level of complexity. How do you bring that knowledge into a wedding situation? Because I know that's something that, speaking of high stress and a lot of things you are not controlling, how do you manage weddings? And again, a bit more on how would you recommend somebody to go about it when it's their first one or they're still, very early in the process of becoming a photographer?
Man, well, weddings, everything is happening so fast. You almost don't even have time to think. It's one of those, at least for me, like, especially in the early days, it's like when you get the photos in the Lightroom, you're like, I should have shot it this way, or I should have used these settings. So you kind of just figure it out. Like, it's almost like once you're in those like, oh shoot situations again, you're like, oh, this is what I should have done that last time. So you just remember like, let's shoot at this shutter speed. Let's jump to this ISO. Let's shoot wide open. Honestly, just shoot wide open when in doubt. Like if it's a dark situation, just shoot as open as you can. And I try not to go over 6400 ISO.
Okay.
Just a personal thing. I think it gets a little too grainy for me. But I don't know. Maybe some of these more modern cameras can handle it. I don't know. But for folks just starting, honestly, just second shoot, make friends with. Well, it's kind of weird. I feel like the wedding community, they're a little more standoffish because I think they're like, don't take my business. You know what I mean? But,
very competitive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough industry for sure. Yeah. And it's kind of a silly thing. There are like a lot of these threads in San Antonio. There's like kind of a big joke where it's like people are constantly undercutting each other in the comments. Like, I'll do it for this much. I'll do it for this much. And like, there's like kind of a big joke where like people are like, I'll pay you to shoot your wedding. Like,
yeah, exactly. I'll pay you $200 just to hire me so I can put your name on my website.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's tough. But second shoot as much as you can. Shoot your friends' weddings. I mean, I feel like so many folks, especially like for younger folks, like 25, like they don't want to drop the 2,000 to 5,000 on a wedding photographer. So I'm sure they'd be happy for like if you're just starting out. I'm sure they'd be thrilled to have you shoot their photos.
Nice. I want to go back on the street because there is one photo I'm looking at this very moment, and I'm captivated by it. And Devin, this is the maybe you don't remember it. It's 47 weeks ago. That's a long time ago, but it's that photo. I'm sure you will remember it though. Taken on your Leica M10 with your 50 mil of a guy with a cigarette in black and white, square photo, black and white.
I do remember that one.
So for me, that has everything a photo should have. A bit of mystery. The guy is, we don't know if he's looking at us or at somebody else. So there's a mystery around it. There's a story that you can build in your head. So talk to me a bit more about when do you know you need to hit that shutter, click and capture the image. What makes you want to go out on the street and click that shutter, and what makes you say, hey, this could be a nice character, a nice image, or a nice story I want to capture?
I think. So I'm just drawn to unique people, I think, or like situations. So he's somebody, I saw him from 2 blocks away and I said, I'm going to take his photo, or I'm going to talk to him at least and take his photo. And so I pretty much just walked up, kind of nodded at him, and we just basically started to talk. We talked for maybe 5 minutes, just chit chatting about whatever. And then I was like, hey, would you mind if I take your photo? I took your portrait. And he was like, me? I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And so that's probably the fifth photo in that little set. We took maybe like 8 photos. But a big thing too, like when you're taking street portraits, it's like, don't just take one and be like, all right, thanks, and like walk away. Like,
Yeah.
I almost incorporating like the studio aspect of like workshopping a scene, working a scene till you get the right photo. And so I took a few and they're good, but as soon as I took that photo, I was like, okay, we got it. You know, like I got the one that I knew I had seen. You know, like I don't know. So, yeah, that's one of my favorite street portraits.
Do you pre-visualize kind of like the end result, or do you go with the flow? Like, what type of approach do you have on the streets?
It's a little bit of both. I do go in with an idea, but then sometimes, going with the flow will lead you to a different photo you may not have seen before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. That's
so a little bit of both. A little bit of both.
I think that's the best way to go about it, because I think it's Joel Meritz who said in one of his interviews that, he goes in with no plan, but what he knows is, when the light will hit a certain building, and then, it'll make for a nice dramatic scene and so on. But then he's open-minded to whatever will happen in front of him. He turned out pretty good in the end for him. But
worked out just fine.
Yeah. If I can take one or half of one of the photos he took, I think I'm good for life. But I doubt that this will happen. Anyways, but all that being said, I like the use of your of the tones also that you use on your portraits. It's sometimes you like to use some of like this big flash. Again, I'm looking at another photo where you've got a very good-looking woman in front of a blue wall, and she has a blue shirt, and then there's a lamp in the back. But that story that you built, how do you decide how you're gonna tone it, if I can say, or light it to go harsh light or to go more muted? Like, how do you make those decisions? I think this is something our listeners would be very interested to learn more about.
So yeah, and so that's actually also shot with the M10. I have a little flash. I think it's $80 on B&H.
Okay.
It's super tiny. It's just powered by AA. When I shoot those kinds of scenes, I use my handy meter, as I'll promote again. I just measure the light once, and then from there I just set it for usually f8, like 1/25 of a second, ISO 400, I think. And it's pretty much just a point and shoot there. It's just compose and fire. So actually that's one of my favorite things to do is to use the M10 like in that way. But yeah, truthfully, in that scene, I just think I saw, here's a beautiful woman, here's a beautiful scene. Let's just capture it like as best as we can, and almost as fast as we can, because there was kind of a lot going on in that moment. So I actually think I only took 2 photos, and just in and out real quick.
Nice.
But yeah,
it turned out very well, and again that style. Do you get inspired by some of the great photographers of this world? Are you more somebody who looks at books or YouTube? Like, what's your source of inspiration?
Yeah, and I don't know how much it translates, but I do have a lot of books. I have a whole bookshelf which isn't in here, but kind of random. But one of my favorite photographers is Dennis Hopper. He has a whole photo book from the 60s that is just like so good. And I think he does a really good job of just like capturing his subjects. I mean, obviously a lot of them are famous. So in a way it's like how hard, I don't know, like you can't mess up those photos, but I think he does it in a very like artistic way. So that's like one of my biggest inspirations, obviously, Henri Cartier-Bresson. But if you actually look back at like his portrait work and not just his street photography stuff, like his portrait work is really good as well.
Yeah, I
Despite
agree.
not being highlighted. Yeah.
I love when it's like we're going to go back to music. This is something we both love. But when you know the B face on a vinyl, right? So you have all the the good songs on the first phase, but then on the second one, you're like, oh, those songs. So for me, when you think about, like, I don't know, Egglestone is a great example of, he did portraits, at the end of the day, and they're freaking
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
I think I
yeah,
prefer the portraits than the rest of the work. So I just love when this happens,
yeah.
when you find, it's like, I don't know, maybe Ansel Adams shot headshots. I don't know, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. We all know
Right.
him for his landscape stuff in black and white,
Yeah.
but when you find that little gem that not a lot of people have seen, I think this is
Hmm.
where it becomes very interesting, and you see how the skill of a photographer is transferable to different type or genre of
Right.
photography. So this is definitely something I see in your work too, that you can go from the studio doing portrait or wedding into the street, and have that same approach or same mindset when you go about it. So
Right.
that's
Well,
very
thank you.
very interesting there. Um, wow, I took 2 photos and they're all Leica. So there must be something, a secret sauce in those cameras. And I promised
I think
before
so. I
I
think
promised before the
so.
show we wouldn't be talking about gear, but we kind of have to, because you and I have some, I would say, a big amount of affection for those little
For
cameras that we
sure.
have here. But what made you, first of all, how did you discover that specific brand, and what made you go and take the plunge for an M10 in that matter?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to our mutual friend John Hendrick. He was the first person I met here in San Antonio shooting a Leica.
Yeah.
Well, and also he was the first person I actually like became friends with in the darkroom class I took. There were folks in there shooting Leica, but these guys are like masters, and like just like these older guys who make the most beautiful darkroom prints you'll ever see in your life. But I've also at the time was like younger and a bit intimidated, so I was like I didn't even talk to them. I was just like marveled at their work and kept walking. So John was the first person who showed me, and as we discussed too, like I do use Sony for like weddings, and so when I saw John shooting the Leica, I was like, man, the 240 is just like it. It's just like a film camera. Like I got so tired of just shooting like automated or just like the newer DSLRs. You can't mess up. You can't mess up using them. Like they're so easy to use.
Yeah.
Um, that I wanted to be like in tune with my camera, in tune with like the moment, instead of just like firing away, like spraying and praying, I guess as they call it. So when I bought the M10, I don't know, it changed me, and honestly, it's made me a better photographer. Like I'm always like thinking of like f-stop, shutter speed, like in the moment, instead of like letting my camera decide for me. And I don't know. It's kind of just it goes back to music as well too. Just being in tune with your instrument, and just knowing it so well. So shooting like although harder, is more fun and more gratifying, I guess.
I think you're totally right. And when you look at I mean, I look at your background here. You've got a Fender in there. I've got one too. So I
Yeah.
mean, there's no reason why we should love those 1965 or 1980 type of guitars and cameras. But there's something about connecting with the root of an art form, or you talked about Henri Cartier-Bresson, or you can talk about Jimi Hendrix. Like these guys use a certain
Yeah.
type of instrument, and you might be inspired by it. I mean, for me, and I guess it's the same for you, but when I look at that, like 10 in front of me, I don't just look at a camera like this, and nothing against the Sony. The Sony will get the
Yeah.
job done, like you said. At the wedding,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I want that eye autofocus to be like shooting
Yeah.
laser into their eyes and
Yeah.
capturing them.
Exactly.
But when I'm on the street and I want to be, to your point, in tune with the moment, the scene, the story, I get inspired by holding a similar instrument that Henri Cartier-Bresson did, or that Jimi Hendrix did on stage, back then in 1960, whatever. So that's a very interesting parallel. And the more I talk about or with photographers that have been musicians, a lot of them turned out to be Leica users for that specific reasons.
I could see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But so what's for you a great visual story that inspired? Could be a movie, could be a book, could be a drawing, painting, whatever. Like, is there one that you've got stuck in your mind since a long time? It's still in your mind today, and it will be in the future because it's such an appealing or interesting or engaging story that you interacted with.
Oh man. As far as what? I'm so sorry.
Oh man, and
What?
it could be any art form. Like for me, as an example, there's a book called 1984 by George Orwell. When I read
Mm-hmm.
it, it was so
Okay.
powerful. It was
Yeah.
such a story that I got to visualize in my mind. But now it's so well
Mm-hmm.
defined that when I read it, I was flabbergasted. When 5 years later, I was still thinking about it. Today, I'm still thinking about it, and I know that in 10 years, I will still think about that book called 1984 because it was such an important piece of art that I've held in my hands.
Yeah.
For some people, it might be a painting or a drawing or a poem, whatever. But is there something that for you is like this is something that inspires me day in and day out?
Gosh. Yes. I feel like there's too much, but I think it all kind of started back in the music days. We actually toured a good deal, and so we would just talk a lot. And one of my friends in the band recommended a book called Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut,
Okay.
and I think that was really the start of me just deep diving into art. And I feel like that book kind of just changed my life as far as like just artistically and I don't know. You explained it in such a great way, but it made me feel the same way you felt about 1984.
Well, that's exactly it. And the point I'm trying to make here is that there's so many things that are not necessarily related to photography or the art form that we
Mm-hmm.
love, that inspires us, back then, today, and that will keep inspiring us. And I think this is something that people underestimate. Like they're so much into the photography. We were talking about YouTube channels, like they
Mm-hmm.
watch YouTube channels. And I think you were talking about even burning out on watching YouTube at some point. So I think sometimes you need
Just a
to
little bit.
exactly, and I'm the same. And man, I'm saying that, and I just recorded a YouTube video this morning. I'm like, what am I doing
Yeah.
with my life? Why am I even doing this? I'm not even doing it for the brands or the money. I'm not that type of YouTuber. Anyways, I have my own issues, but uh, then I always go back to that moment where I held something that somebody else created, a book,
Mm-hmm.
a song.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's also songs that brings me to that mindset, and I'm like, wow, there's so many ways to be inspired, to get inspired, to
Mm-hmm.
share the passion of art that we have. That it makes it beautiful, and then for me personally, it inspires me to go out and shoot
Mm-hmm.
again, or pick up the guitar and try to compose something, because I'm
Yeah.
like, if somebody can create something so beautiful as that book,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm just a human like anybody else, or like that person, and I can do it too. Speaking of which, the photography community, I don't know how it is in Texas and in San
Yeah.
Antonio, but we were talking pre-show. Social media kind of give you one aspect of the photography
For
community. I
sure.
don't know if I like it so much, but how is it for you? And how do you find friends in there, and encouragement, or even criticism, but
Yeah.
constructive criticism at the end of the day?
Yeah. Honestly, I'd say there's a big photography community here, and um, I don't know. It's almost like I know we keep talking about music, but like almost like everybody breaks off into their own niches, or like you have your professionals, you have your semi-professionals, your weekend warriors. So I don't know. I would say personally, I'm in a good mix of like the world of like the professionals, but also the professional artists, and even just like I don't know. I don't know. Does that make any sense? Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
no,
know.
absolutely. Because today, how how do you define being a photographer in 2023, right? Because
Yeah.
back then it was super precise, right? You were a wedding photographer,
Mhm.
you were doing weddings
Yeah.
every weekend, and that was your source of income, and that's it.
Hmm.
But how would you define being a photographer in 2023? These days, do you
I,
have to make money to call yourself a photographer? Like, what's your view on the art form itself? I'm asking the big question.
I,
This is not a show about gear, I told you.
I don't think you necessarily have to make money to be a photographer, but I also feel like it's probably good if you do.
Yeah,
Like,
it would be nice to have.
I think that's probably I think that's like, oh man, like in a weird like capitalist way, it's almost like that's definitely a way of just like respect and appreciation. People are
Yeah.
showing you through their money that they respect the art you're creating. So, Grant, I don't think like money's everything, and like you have to do this strictly for money. But I think, and I actually also feel the same way like about music. But just like I think it's a way of the world and community showing they respect what you're doing. So I think you should think some money doing photography.
And especially knowing that a lot of photographers quit, that job because it's not an easy. Again, don't look at just YouTube and Instagram. It's not all just rosy and fun and dandy. There's hard work to be done to be able to make a living out of it. And what I like about what you're saying is that it shows respect for the art form, and it's an art form that's being a bit baffled lately. I mean, just think about what AI is doing right now to the art of photography, right? So I think it will never replace the art of photography, but it will probably replace product photography and like some more like static type things. So it poses some serious questions on what does it mean to be a photographer in 2023. And if you're a young person who's starting off literally today, first job, I think you have to be very clever in using, the technology that's available, but also having, to your point, your own voice, your own unique, point of view, and adding to the conversation, because it's getting harder, to be honest, to have that impact, that specific voice, or that, super specific niche where people are hiring you specifically for that job. So, have you seen the role of photographer evolve over the past 10 years that you've been shooting, especially for yourself?
The role,
like being a photographer. Like, did you see an evolution? Are people more interested in giving you more contract, more money, or is it less, or is it like is the photographer community? I don't know for you guys where you live, but here again, to my earlier point, a lot of people just quit because there's not enough jobs, there's not enough money to make in that.
For sure, it's definitely a grind. I feel like after these last 3 years, or like the pandemic and everything, I think a lot of folks who were like maybe semi-serious kind of dropped off, and so now I think it's almost mostly just like, if you're in it to win it, you're still going strong. Well, you're still going.
Yeah.
And you're still trying to make it every day. Gosh, but I don't know. I'm actually going to jump on something you said earlier with like the AI. And I could see like maybe photographers going more back to film to like offer like maybe a more authentic, like real image, as opposed to like AI and digital. I don't know. That's like something I've been wondering and pondering.
It's such a great point, Devin. I even started to put on my post like non-AI image or something like that, just because there's so much of it, and it's pretty good, honestly. Like some of them are,
of course, it really is.
It's not very good for like still for like portraits and hands and stuff, but it's you could definitely see that it's generated, but it's not long before we are fooled by fake images and fake well, I mean, fake news has been around for a little while now, but with those fake images. But anyways, I want to go back to the art of photography. So any long-term project that you worked on, that you started a couple months or a couple years ago, that you're still working on, or any new project you want to embark on with your photography, Devin?
I mean, and actually it's the first photo you brought up. It's just called Portraits of Strangers.
Nice.
And truthfully, I know it's like been done a million times. But it's something I'm passionate about.
But it hasn't been done by you. It hasn't been done by you.
It hasn't been done by me. Yeah, exactly. So, truthfully, which also is partly a mini, or it's something I wonder what to do, but, because I have so many images that I haven't shared yet because I'm saving them for a book. So nice. Kind of, I let out a few pieces here and there, but I am working on a hopeful book that'll come out. I'm hoping maybe next year. But yeah, I shoot that's pretty much my street photography project. Like anytime I go out, I'm working towards that.
And do you try to go out every week, every day?
Yeah.
What's your?
I go weekly. I used to go maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I'm probably at 2 times now, just with everything I have going on. But yeah,
and would you
try to go out?
Would you say consistency is important to build your
For sure.
craft? Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you do need to take a break, but for a while I was doing it only in black and white film. For a while I was doing it with the M10. So I don't know. I think it's going to be mixed media or mixed cameras, but
nice.
Yeah.
Well, we can't wait.
Probably the M10 and the M2.
Yeah, M2, man. You're rocking the M2 on the film side.
Yeah.
So hence that light meter, very useful. There you go. So are you now able to gauge all light situation and just dial it in on top of your head, or you still use that light meter on the streets?
John and I went shooting the other day, and I forgot my light meter at home, and I shot everything just by eye. And when I got the film back, I shot it. It was color too, and it was all good to me.
There you go. You're there.
Yeah,
you can measure with your eyes. you reach that level.
I'm pretty good at measuring with the eye. Yeah, sunny 16. I mean, I don't.
Yeah. You're right. If it's a sunny day, I will admit it's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And if it's dark, just shoot wide open and slow shutter speed.
There you go. And then if it's blurry, you just say, yeah, but it was my choice.
Artistic.
It was artistic. Yeah. I was inspired by Soul Lighter, all this.
Yeah, stuff. Exactly.
Favorite focal length that you like to shoot on the street?
50.
Oh, yeah.
50 guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty much all I shoot. I shoot probably I'll say I shoot 35 every once in a while. But I have a 50 Summicron.
Yep.
And it's pretty much on both of my cameras, almost exclusively. 35's cool too, but 50 just makes sense to me.
So you're not a 28 street photographer.
I'm not, but sometimes I kind of want to.
You would like to capture more in the scene?
Yeah, it seems fun. It's kind of like a point and shoot too, just like F8 and you're kind of good to go.
Yeah, F8 and be there, I think was the saying.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, F8 and be there. I think that was.
I believe it.
Yeah. They were telling the journalists back in the day. And Devin, any recommendation you would have for people who want to learn more about portrait photography more specifically? Is there a resource? Of course, they can follow you and ask you questions, but is there like a person on YouTube or Skillshare or whatever the platform, but that you're like, this guy, you should follow him, or this woman, you should follow her. She is or he is, great.
Gosh, I would say, and there's actually 2 folks I follow on. Well, I guess I don't really anymore, but the 2 folks I followed the most in the early days were Sean Tucker and this guy named Manny Ortiz.
Manny Ortiz, yes, he's great.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, I mean, so he has a whole video on how to shoot with one light, and I probably watched that a million times before I had my first client come into the studio with and to shoot studio work with. But yeah, I think they're both pretty just quick, intuitive teachers. And so I would recommend them.
And they're completely different, right? So Manny Ortiz, he has his wife, I think he works with, and she's beautiful, but then he puts her in various situations, and Sean is more dramatic, with the Rembrandt type approach
totally.
And stuff. So I love that you gave 2 again, Manny very in the light and poppy, I don't know how to say it, and again Sean a bit more the storytelling and the dramatic aspect of it. So yeah, two great YouTubers to follow, and they both have also a very added value, I would say, approach to YouTube. We were talking about burning out on YouTube. Every time there's a Sean Tucker video, I know it's not going to be again about the gear or about a brand that sponsored the video. I have nothing against people who are making a living with sponsored videos.
Same.
But I will get more value out of a video from Sean than anything else, because he talks about the art of, or the struggle of, being a photographer sometimes. And also just life stuff, right? So we were talking about that. He shares some personal life stuffs, and it's great to see people on the platform doing doing this type of approach. Devin, if people want to know more about your work, where would you send them first?
Yeah, I mean, I have my website too. I have my Instagram, but both are just Devin De Leon Photo. So devindeleonphoto.com or Devin De Leon Photo Instagram. And then I kind of have this other page, which I probably should have sent you, that I was making a film only page, but I think now it's just
film only.
The B-sides.
Yeah,
the B-sides, kind of like we were saying.
Yeah.
Let me get that. I just changed name. I kind of changed names on it a lot, but right now it's just Devin Michael, but it's Devin with 3 N's or no 4 N's.
4 N's. Devin.
4 N's. Devin Michael. But yeah, and that one has a lot of just film stuff and kind of the B-sides, like we were saying. So maybe I don't know. I actually think people might like this page more.
You know what? I'm going through it. I didn't know that page, and I'm following it right now. I'm going to put it in the show notes so people can actually go there and follow it. And I love your portrait work, but I will say that what I'm seeing right now on the film page is very, very interesting. And yeah, man, this is a very nice page.
I should have told you. Yeah, that one's actually more so my street photography page, and also maybe just like daily life, personal life. So I have some photos of my friends performing, and I forgot. I should have told you about this one.
Well, now the world knows, or at least the community of
now the world knows.
Exactly. We're going to put it in the show notes, and I'm expecting at least 1 million followers after we release this episode. So.
Absolutely.
But Devin, it's been great discussing with you. Again, I think there's so much more we could have talked about, but I want you to come back on the show when you have your book, because that's always a big moment for a photographer when you're like, you know what, it's like having a baby, I guess, for a photographer. Is like, here it is, that's my baby, and that's I'm putting in all of my work and my effort. So I guess you look forward for that moment, and let me know when it's out, because I'm gonna make sure that the visual storytelling community knows about it, and that we all celebrate you for that upcoming book.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Fred. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much. And again, for everybody who are listening to this podcast, if you would like to give a 5-star review to this podcast, please do so on the App Store, whatever the App Store you use, whether it's Apple or Spotify or Amazon and so on and so forth. If you want to learn more about Devin, I'm going to put all the links in the show notes, his website, his Instagram, and heck, maybe his YouTube if he gets back to doing more YouTube videos. And
absolutely,
yeah, man. And you can catch him, I guess, now with his band also doing some shows in San Antonio if you're there. What's the name of the band, Devin?
Yeah, it's called Of the Lions.
There you go.
So that's just what De Leon means in English. There's 3 De Leons in the band. So
wow,
I'm not related to them. Yeah, I know.
Well, that's a subject for the next podcast. It's like
absolutely.
Cool stuff, man. Take care, and we'll chat soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cheers.